choose to take it, they historically there have been issues around how they manage their house. So these clauses will include this as is and as available kind of language, and they'll try to state at the outset that the platform may experience interruptions or contain errors. So many times they will not even guarantee the accuracy, reliability, or completeness of any information provided. So this type of for users. Okay. Now, there is a worked example that we have for Google here. So see, now look at the highlighted words, okay? Expressly understand and agree that your use of the services at your sole risk, okay? And that the services are provided as is and as available. And Google and its subsidiaries and affiliates do not represent or warranty you that. They've literally given negative represent or warranties. This is the opposite of how many of you remember representations and warranties? We very briefly touched upon that in the previous class. Do we remember? Yes? Okay. Okay, great. So yeah, look at how this is structured. They'll have negative reps and warranties. Your use of the services will meet so they are basically saying that we do not represent or warrant that your use of the services will meet your requirements, or your use of the services will be uninterrupted, timely, secure, or free from error. They're literally saying we're not guaranteeing any of this, okay? Google is literally saying that, that any information you'll get will be accurate or reliable, or that the defects will be corrected. So that's kind of one way. Okay. Now, the other type of clause that you will come across is, for example, the limitation of liability for paid services. And limitation of liability is a very standard clause that you will come across in most agreements that are, for products and paid products and services. So now the rationale behind this is, and behind any LOL clauses, that essentially if you're paying a certain amount, okay, to a company to be able to use their service, would you say that in that case, does that change at all, that if you're able to claim something from them if something goes wrong? Should you be able to claim from them if there is, if something goes wrong with their website or something happens? Rosie says no. Rohan says yes, yes. So the answer is yes. The answer is yes, because this is like any standard sort of, transaction that would be governed under your, regular sort of rules of sale and purchase. You've paid a certain amount, so you are entitled to expect a certain level of service. And but the limitation of liability clause, what it does across agreements is that it limits, as it says on the tin, it limits the liability, the maximum amount that the company is liable to pay in case something goes wrong. And typically it would be limited to, let's say, the subscription fee or the amount that is paid by the user. So it could be framed also in the way that, so for example, it could be 1 month's license fee or fees paid, basically the subscription fee or fees paid in the last 12 months. So the company can say that whatever losses and damages you incur, our maximum liability will be capped up to 1 month's license fee. Or they could also, define the scope of the losses covered, and they could say that, only direct losses will fall within the cap, while excluding, indirect and consequential or punitive damages. There is, I mean, do we know that what the difference between direct and indirect and consequential losses is? Can I quickly move on? Yes. Yes. Okay, great. Now, so this is the example language. If the service or app does not function as intended, or its malfunction causes a loss to you, the company shall be liable to indemnify you for losses incurred up to the extent of 1 month's license fee. Okay, straightforward. Now, the third thing, terms and conditions. Sorry. Clause. Terms and conditions should clearly specify the grounds can end, ensure that all concerned parties understand it. very crucial clause across all types of agreements. Terms and conditions, specifically the termination clause, will, again, this is also very agnostic. So the specific grounds, of course, will be listed. What are the situations and circumstances under which termination can be initiated by the company? Is there a possibility that, either party can initiate? There's something called termination without notice. Okay, and that usually might be it's different in case of a terms and condition website terms and conditions, but usually in other sort of contracts, business contracts, vendor contracts, termination without notice is quite onerous. It's not a good provision to have to be on the other side of, basically. But users' right to terminate and the process to be followed. Process is also extremely important. Notice period requirements that must be observed. And so now in the case of like typically like a tech company or a website or a startup that's managing their sort of business online, data handling procedures specifying how user data will be managed, transferred, or deleted post termination, extremely important from a DPDPA perspective. That's the Data Protection Act perspective. Outstanding payment processes, including how refunds and pending payments will be resolved upon termination, and survival clauses, which identify which contractual terms continue to bind the parties even after termination. Okay. Now we move on to the next very important clause for our use case, which is the ownership of intellectual property. And we have also just touched upon this in the plagiarism example that we discussed for, let's say, an edtech company. And, this is something that should address both company-owned IP and user-generated content. Now,